Hi, everybody. I'm Marita Sielman. I'm the Executive Director of Studio Art Quilt Associates. And today we are telling you all about our upcoming benefit auction. What you just saw on the slideshow was maybe a quarter of the almost 400 pieces that are up for auction starting in September. And we're going to show you some more during the program. Before we get started, this is our 4th year of doing Textile Talks, and we're always looking for new programs, new ideas. So if you would like to be on Textile Talks, please apply by the end of the month at www.saqa.com/calls. We'd love to hear what you'd like to propose. So this is the 17th year that SAQA is doing a benefit auction, auctioning off these wonderful pieces of art that are 12 inches or about 30 centimeters square. I love this time of year because it is so fascinating to see all the different ways that our artists take that small space and create something magical. So we wanted to show you this collection of one of our members, Elizabeth Nascenta-Delacroix, who is a frequent buyer from the auction and has them beautifully displayed in her studio. If you would like to see the rest of the auction pieces and to read a little bit about each one, each piece has an artist statement on a website. Just go to www.saqa.com/auction, and that will take you to the landing page for the benefit auction. The online bidding will start on September 14th, and it's an unusual process for an auction in that it starts high and then goes lower each day. So on the 14th, every piece is available for $1,000. Then starting the following Monday, we've divided it into 3 sections to make it a little easier to manage. The pieces that are labeled section 1 will drop down to $750, then $550, all the way down to $100 on the 23rd and 24th. Then we'll do that with section 2 and then section 3. So it's up to you what your price point is, but this is how the auction works. And it makes it really fun for everybody, but it takes a little getting used to if you've never encountered what we call a reverse auction. On the website, you are directed to our bidding platform, which is called HandBid. In order to bid in the auction, you will need to register with HandBid and give them your contact information for shipping and your credit card for purchases. And that then lets you access the auction. And once it's no longer pending but active, you'll be able to get into the full auction and be able to follow your favorite pieces, which you can mark by clicking on a little heart to say that it's one of your favorites and you want notifications when its price changes. The last thing that you need to know is that even if you're not in the market to purchase artwork, you can still have a lot of fun creating a dream collection at saqa.com/dream. You get to choose 8 pieces, which you think will make a nice selection, and we'll put them up on the website. I love seeing these because unlike being confronted with, almost 400 pieces, these are grouped by themes, whether it's quiet flow or faces or waves or color and composition. And it's fascinating to see how the art changes depending upon how it's grouped together. And that, of course, is what I do in my home, where I have auction quilts all over the house. Today, we have a wonderful opportunity to hear from 12 of the artists who have donated their artwork for the benefit auction. The first 5 artists are with us here live, and they'll be talking to you about their work. If you have questions for them, please go ahead and put them in the chat, and they'll answer them when they finish their presentation. And then we'll hear from 7 other artists who are not able to join us here today live, but whose comments we pre-recorded. And then at the very end, we will have another slideshow for you of another approximately 100 pieces to enjoy. So sit back, and I am thrilled to be able to have Alice Beasley here to tell us about her piece, Danny's Shoes.
Hi, everybody. I'm Alice. I'm going to do a little confession about the backstory of this piece. I do all representational work, and most of the time that means I start with an idea. I do research if it's necessary to determine how all the pieces, the body parts, the objects, the background, etc., can be portrayed accurately. With objects in particular, that can mean downloading reference photographs so that I can reproduce the object accurately in fabric. If while I'm making the piece, I create something that isn't working quite right, maybe a hand, an eye, a figure, or an object, and it doesn't look quite right, I toss the offending object into a bin and save it so that maybe I can use it in something else later. I call it my body farm. For this 12 by 12, however, because I was pressed for time, I started not with an idea, but with my body farm. Searching through my bin, I came across these shoes that I had created for some other piece. For whatever reason, they hadn't worked within the context of that piece, but I thought they were actually pretty good on their own. So I decided to make a 12 by 12 about my grandson, Danny, and his love of all things soccer. So I did a lot of work on the shoes, added shadows and shoelaces and so forth, and ended up with this piece and sent it in. I probably spent more time fixing it than if I'd started from scratch, but oh well, so far, so good. But because I hadn't started with the idea first, I hadn't actually researched what soccer shoes look like. After I sent it in, something was nagging me, and I looked up soccer shoes online and realized they don't really look like this because of all the cleats on the bottom of the shoe. What I had actually depicted was a tennis shoe or a running shoe. Now, I'm kind of obsessed with accuracy in my art. I could just picture bidders saying, "That's not a soccer shoe. Where are the cleats?" But the piece was in the mail, wending its way to SAQA. Nothing I could do about that. So if the object can't change, then you have to change the idea. So I took out all the soccer references in the write-up and just changed it to an ambiguous Danny's shoes. As Tim Gunn would say, make it work. But there is one little giveaway. If you look closely at the piece, you'll see that the background is made up of tiny shapes that look like soccer balls. At the time, I was proud that I'd found a fabric in my stash that fit perfectly with the soccer theme. And now, well, nobody's perfect. Thanks.
Thank you, Alice. I had no idea that they were supposed to be soccer cleats. They are wonderful simply as tennis shoes or sneakers. And I really love the background. Now we're going to hear from Laria and her piece, Desert Lightning.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for attending. For those of you who aren't familiar with my work, for the last few years, I've been focused on how to simplify landscapes. And to that aim, I almost exclusively now use my own hand-dyed and dye-painted fabrics. I don't paint the landscape per se, but I rather construct the landscape from shapes made from my dye processes. My work often begins with one or more of my own photographs. And since I'm not attempting hyperrealism, I search for images that have a basic, pleasing composition, and I don't worry about whether it's a great photograph or not. I'll sometimes use photo editing software on one or more images to recompose and to create an imagined landscape. In this piece, Desert Lightning, I started with lots and lots of images of saguaro cacti that I shot on a spring trip to the Southwest this year. All my photos were taken in daylight. Many were full of flowers, and I was overwhelmed with choices on what to do for this auction piece. One technique I use to help distill an idea is to create some sort of boundary conditions or impose limits. And the SAQA auction itself provides one in that the format is square. For some of you may think that is actually a hard boundary condition to work with. I also will try and focus on maybe one primary art element. And in looking at these photographs, I realized that the variety of the shapes of the saguaro is what intrigued me. So it's the shape of that saguaro. Then choosing a monochrome palette as another restriction, and there's only one dye color I used in this piece, I greatly reduced the noise of options and could focus just on shapes. Anyone who knows the Southwest desert knows how dramatic summer storms can be. And by fantasizing a lightning storm at night, I chose high contrast as another element to provide a sense of drama in an otherwise very flat landscape silhouette. Contrast also exists between the upward rounded shapes of the cactus and the jagged downward lightning, as well as the extreme values of white and black. As I was going through this piece and making it, I realized that there was also a subtle contrast, not necessarily obvious, but it's a temporal one. And it's between the fraction of a second that lightning exists compared to the centuries-old saguaros. There are only 3 pieces of fabric used in this piece. I dye painted the sky, creating an ombre effect to mimic lighter atmosphere around the lightning. I then cut out the thicker lightning bolts and fused the sky fabric onto white. The foreground and the saguaros were made from the darkest value of my dye solution, and all were fused on the now layered sky. And finally, I added the finer detailed bits of lightning with some white thread painting and finished with high density quilting overall. And I think this piece is actually going to take me in a new direction. So I'm looking forward to doing more with this. Thank you.
Thanks, Kat. It certainly is incredibly dramatic, and your lightning is just phenomenal. Thank you. And now we're going to hear from Veronica Brown.
Hello, everybody. So yes, this is in bloom. For many of you who follow some of the stuff, I just have a fascination with the features and face of women, people, children. So it's always a marriage of the two. And also lately, more importantly, I've just been in this whole concept of technology, technique, texture. So I've been in this whole discovery of how to use our digital tools in a very traditional format, and that juxtaposition and just kind of giving a positive aspect and spin on technology in our work today. And of course, with ChatGPT and all the AI. So this is where it kind of comes from. So I see this as a fusion of the digital and the traditional techniques. It reflects a blend of, to me, the virtual and the real worlds, right? So I worked starting with Procreate, drawing. So that was the original impetus of it. So I had this idea, and then I happened to be, because I'd started a whole nother piece before this, and then that wasn't working the way I wanted. And I happened to be looking outside and walked in the backyard and saw some cone flowers, the echinacea, and I'd started taking photos of that. And then somehow or another, I was like, oh, let's kind of marry the two of them and let's see what I can come up with that. So I'm playing in the Procreate and I'm putting that together. And so you have that digital tool that creates the endless possibilities, the endless creative possibilities. So I'm not making, stopping. I'm actually doing it all and saving it within the Procreate. So I have that opportunity. And then, of course, I'm figuring out the different blends and shadows and ways to do it. And then by, adding the Inktense, that's an opportunity to add the tactile. That's that traditional. That's something that you can't get by machine or by a tool, because it's a tactile application. So it's using a traditional tool, and it provides that tangible and organic aspect of this piece. And so to me, the quilt symbolizes more of a harmonious coexistence of like innovation and tradition and artistic expression. And again, it also merges, what I would see as diverse elements. It represents both, personal identity as well as nature's beauty as well. You have the young brown-skinned woman with cornrows, and it's like a symbolization of empowerment, diversity, individuality, considering, there's the Crown Act and all these things that are, being, coming to the surface within our society, and then overlaying that image with cone flowers, which is also echinacea, which is healing. It underscores that harmony between human identity and the natural world. So it's my representation of the multifaceted aspects of life and a unique beauty that arises when they come together.
Thank you. Yeah, for me, this is simply one of the most joyous pieces in the whole auction, and I love looking at it. Thank you very much. And now we're going to hear from Gwyneth Reif about her kitty.
Yes, this is my kitty. Her name is Lola, and I have had the privilege to live with cats nearly all my life. She's probably cat number 9 or 10 in my life. She's been with us for 13 years now. And I have learned just about everything I need to know from observing cats. And what I can say is they are persistent, they are determined, they are intelligent, they are creative. And I try and bring that to my art as well, which SAQA benefit auctions, the various auctions that I've submitted portraits of Lola to, have forced me to work in a small scale, a much more detailed, tiny, intricate scale than my normal work. And I first started thread painting, which is how I create all my Lola images. I first started doing thread painting back when I saw an article on Ellen Ann Eddy in Quilter's newsletter, and her work absolutely fascinated me, so much so that I decided to hire her to speak to our guild and to take a class from her. And this has to be at least 20 years ago. Well, I took the class, but the class did not take. And this is where we get back to the cats and the perseverance and determination, because every 3 or 4 or 5 years, I try thread painting again. And then I'd put it aside and I'd work in my more comfortable piecing style. And then I return to it. And finally, through tweaking how Ellen Ann Eddy does her work and how I create mine, I figured out a system that works for me. What I really love about the SAQA auction quilts is the opportunity to experiment. So when I need to try out a new technique, I can do it in a small space. So not only did I try out thread painting a few years ago, but I needed to learn how to do some trapunto for a much larger piece. So what better than to create the blanket in a trapunto style, which I did here. So there's actually a little bit of a 3D element going on in this piece. If you were to purchase it, the blanket sticks out about ½ an inch or from the actual piece itself. So what can I say? Learning everything from my cat about what I need to do to create art. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Gwyneth. I also am partial to cats, so I always love seeing what you've created. Now we're going to hear from Maria Stoller.
Hello, everyone. I'm Marita Stoller. I am a mixed media artist from Switzerland. And this is the 5th time I've given a quilt into the SAQA auction. I like to use a little piece of what I'm working at the time. And so this is a good example. my work has to do with emotion and the drawn line. I use the portrait usually, and it's something that I need to draw by hand. So I have to practice drawing portraits a lot. I find my subjects on the internet. There are a lot of apps and things for people who want to practice portrait and portrait drawing. And if I don't find something that I like, then I just draw myself, self-portrait. There's also an online community for that on Facebook, Self-Portrait Sundays. So I do that too, as well as just practice for drawing the portrait. Once I have the portrait drawn, I'm happy with it. Then I put it on the water-soluble sleeves, transfer it to there, and then I draw the portrait with a sewing machine, just the outlines and all of these things, and onto very, very transparent organza fabric. The organza fabric, it's important for me that it's very transparent so that you can see through it to what's behind, and because the background helps tell the story that I'm trying to tell here. Recently, I've been trying to make my own stencils, cutting my own stencils, and I've used them in my recent work that's called Into the Woods. You can see that on my website. And for this piece here, I used the stencil, and oh, thank you. I just see that you say the eyes. I also sometimes will embroider the eyes. And in this case here, I embroidered a few of the features of the face. Sometimes I paint on them too, but this one here I embroider. I use the stencil on this one here with acrylic paint, and of course the quilting, which was dictated by the stenciling. The color tones reminded me of dusk at nighttime, almost at night, and because the forest is something that I use a lot also in my work as backgrounds because of the it's right here next to me, and we go for walks with the dogs all the time. It's a very calming place, and it's a subject that I also use a lot in my work.
Thank you,
And
Maria.
that's all I have to say.
Thank you so much. It is just a gorgeous face. And I really like how the quilting highlights the negative spaces between the branches of the tree. Thank you all so much for being here and sharing your stories live. Now we're going to share the pre-recorded stories from 7 additional benefit auction artists. Enjoy.
Hello, my name is Denise Oyama Miller, and I'm a textile artist from Fremont, California. I really enjoy making the SAQA Benefit Auction quilt each year. It gives me a chance to try out a new design idea or a new color scheme, and while at the same time helping to raise money for some of SAQA's programs. I often use the fabrics from my most recent larger quilt to make the 12-inch square. This year I was particularly drawn to one of the small sections in my latest large quilt. This large quilt is called Urban Reflections, and it's a statement on the housing situation in our state. The colors I use are very typical of the housing colors that you find in California. I decided to make a simple 9-patch design. I was attracted to this rectangular section in my larger quilt, but I needed a square design for each of the parts of my little 9-patch. The top design is the original rectangular shape, and the lower design is my redrawing and redesign of it into a square shape. This piece is done not as a pieced quilt, but as a raw edge applique, with the background fabric or foundation fabric being black. I cut the pieces so that some of the black would show through in the final little quilt. I love the colors, and I think they work well together in this smaller format. I realized that one of the reasons I love these colors and this design is that it reminded me of a video that I saw of an aerial view of a herd of horses in the western part of the United States. it was just a marvelous video, and it showed this herd with an incredible amount of variety in color and value on these horses. And I thought it was amusing that I transferred that to liking the buildings that I found to use in my other quilt, my larger quilt. But I like the horses so much, and so I decided to call this little piece Colors of the Herd. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Marita Collins and I live in Lithuania. I am a member of the 15 by 15 Quilt Challenge group, where 15 artists from around the world, every 2 months, we make a 15 by 15 inch quilt on a previously discussed topic. In 2022, our challenge was to create 6 pieces in the style of an artist of our own choosing. Not surprisingly to myself, I chose Russian painter Arkhip Kuinji. My affair with Kuinji started long ago, in 1981, when in the Museum of Russian Art in then Leningrad, St. Petersburg, Russia now, I stood mesmerized in front of his painting Moonlit Night on the Dnieper, painted in 1880. Arkhip Kuinji lived in the 19th century, and his style was realism. No matter what he painted, every painting had the play of light and shadows and a mesmerizing glow. I knew it wouldn't be easy for me to achieve that, but I was determined to try. I wasn't going to copy his paintings, just to try achieving the play of light and shadows. For all 6 of my quilts, I worked on the photos mostly taken by myself, but for the last one, I chose a photo taken by my nephew on his morning run in Vilnius, Lithuania. It was an amazing winter scene. I cropped the photo and made my quilt using fused applique and a lot of hand stitching, and this is my 15 by 15 quilt winter scene. For this year's benefit auction, I decided to make a replica of this quilt. All I needed to do was to make it 12 by 12 inches instead of 15 by 15. I used some of different fabrics and a little different hand stitching, and this is my benefit auction quilt. And this is the story of this quilt. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carly. I'm a mixed media artist. I'm a sculptor, painter, bookmaker, and textile artist. Anything number related fascinates me and often finds a way into my work. I've been a SAQA member for 8 years, and this is my 6th auction donation. Spyro 3813 is number 5 of 13 in this series, with more to come. It is inspired by the Spirograph toy. I had one as a child and loved to play with it. As an adult, I received one again as a fun gift. I had forgotten how many different sized discs there were in the box, and that they were all number coded to create the pattern. I began by selecting the fabric and forming the circles. These circles correspond to the title of the piece, 3, 8, and 13 in size. I love to paint, and most of my textiles work has acrylic paint applied to the surface. This time, partial circles are painted to create more color and interest. The quilting follows the circle shapes and is in matching colors, so it does not distract from the thread design on the surface. The patterns formed by the Spirograph discs can be very complex or very simple. I decided quickly that I want a simple shape. After all, it's a representation of a spirograph and not a copy. When making a spirograph design, a large ring works in conjunction with the smaller discs. I make mine with binder plastic. I use plastic in a lot of my work. It is easy to cut and sew through. To create the thread designs, I use crochet cotton. It comes in many different colors and has a nice weight that will make it stand out on the surface. A protractor is used to calculate the number of holes and spacing between them. Then I plan out the thread interval, which is how many holes I will skip to create the pattern I want. The final step in the design is to create a secondary spirograph pattern around one of the outer fabric circles. This takes more careful measuring and lots of pins to mark the placements of where the thread will be stitched. Like I said, this is number 5 in the series. If you're interested in seeing other work in my spirograph series, they can be viewed on my website.
Hello, I'm Teresita Leal, a SAQA member from Argentina. And this is my piece, Resilience, which I've donated for the benefit auction. Resilience belongs to a series which I called Essays on Abstraction. In this series, I chose some concepts to work with. I used as tools the language of color and orthogonality as the structure of the composition. I worked with rouage appliqué, which is a technique that allows me great freedom of expression, as each piece of fabric can be added on impulse or as a result of a thoughtful decision. In this piece, the concept is resilience. Life always returns and takes over. A thought inspired in the pandemic and post-pandemic period. The image I had in mind was grass or moss striving to grow between stones, something that is not unusual to see even in the most built-up areas. It's made with commercial and hand-dyed fabrics, mostly cotton, but there is some silk too. And it is entirely machine stitched. And I think that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Hello, this is Tim Carpenter. Welcome to a short video showing examples of inspiration behind the Art Quilt 12x12 called Nantucket Pirouette. This art quilt is a collaboration effort between myself and David Robertson. Traveling is the first inspiration that comes to mind. When I travel, it heightens the senses with an awakened mind, attuned to new visuals and inspirations. With this inspiration in mind, I will also apply fundamental design elements to help me compose the composition of my quilt work. Some of the elements of design that I consider are line, value, color, texture, shape, form, balance, unity, harmony, rhythm, emphasis, proportion, pattern, and variety. For some examples, line in your quilt composition is used in regards to shape and forms. Values show color shadows from light to darkness as you build the composition. Color has 3 distinct qualities: hue and color, value, again light to darkness of the color, intensity, brightness to dullness of color. One of my favorite design elements is texture, which helps me tie the composition together, creating emphasis, movement, pattern, and emotion. In quilt design, the texture can be implied that it exists, but it is only an illusion. Shape encloses a 2-dimensional area. Types of shapes are organic, curved edges, or continuous geometric sharp edges and angles. Form encloses a volume of 3-dimensional area. Light and dark value variations in space are used to emphasize form. Space gives the illusion of depth and space, and ways to create that space are overlapping, shapes or forms in front of each other, and holes and cavities. Balance refers to the equalization of elements in a work of art, and there are three kinds of balance: symmetrical, asymmetrical, and radial. Symmetrical is formal, asymmetrical more informal, and radial is circular designs which starts from the center and moves outward. Unity and harmony relates to the sense of oneness, wholeness, or order in a work of art. And combining similar colors, shapes, lines, textures, and patterns in an artwork can create harmony. Movement refers to the arrangement of parts in a work of art to create slow to fast action of the eye, such as pattern, contrast, and line can create this. Rhythm is a type of movement in an artwork or design, often created by repeated objects. And there are two types of those rhythm, regular and irregular. Emphasis by placing more significant attention on particular areas of objects in a piece of work. Okay, so for more exciting two-dimensional design information, layout, and inspiration, visit ellenmueller.com. Well, that concludes this video. Thanks for listening.
Day's End was inspired by my friend Kelly's photo. She works on the bull farm with her dogs. They look so happy, enjoying the sunset with the sunlight shining in their fur to create a halo effect. I thought it would make a beautiful quilt. The colours were so rich I thought silk was the perfect medium, but I wasn't sure my paints would work on the silk. The paints are heat set colour for textile printing made for screen printing in New Zealand, and I was delighted to discover that they're transparent enough that the silk kept its lustre. I started painting near the sun with a soft lemon colour and let the bleeding come up to the sun, and had a blow dryer ready to stop it if it was going to bleed too far. All my colours were mixed with water ready to go, so they could blend naturally in the sky as I wanted them to. I painted with a little burgundy in front of the dogs and black on the dogs to get a nice silhouette effect. When that was finished, I painted a larger piece of silk for the backing, large enough to make facings. I heat set them with an iron, and then when I started sewing, I put Deco Bob on the bottom because you get a nice light weight, and I didn't have to change the colour. It blended with the whole background. I started sewing white around the sun, and then the white around the dogs and the horizon line. The red rays under the sun I painted from the outside edge up to the sun, put the needle down and sewed back out again. This way I could keep it nice and straight, nicely distanced, and I didn't have to do any knotting on and off. It's on the outside edge of the quilt. Although I did have to knot a little bit underneath the sun where the yellow is. I sewed in and out, knotted off, and threaded the ends back in with the self-threading needle. Instead of changing colours too many times, I used a fabric marker. So where the yellow crossed over the orange, I put a little bit of orange fabric marker over the thread to blend it in. This gave it a lovely finish, and I didn't have to change colours. When I'd finished stitching it, I lightly ironed it with an iron set on silk from the top to set it nice and flat. Then I turn it over and iron it again from the back, which makes it sit nice and flat and plumps it up again. I finished it with the facings that I'd painted at the beginning, and I'm really delighted how well it turned out. I hope you enjoy my quilt. Thank you.
Hi from Atlantic Canada. I'm really honored to have been invited to be part of this Textile Talk. I called my auction piece Geometrics 14. It's one of 32 pieces in my series exploring itajime. Now, itajime is a specific type of shibori dyeing, which is an ancient technique for creating patterns on fabric. In itajime, the fabric is carefully folded into various geometric shapes and then bound with resists and clamps before going into the dye pot. Traditionally, indigo dye was used, resulting in blue and white designs. My aim during this 2-year adventure was to discover my own unique approach to itajime. I used repurposed white cotton torn into strips. My resists were a collection of found objects. I used colorful commercial dyes rather than indigo, and I sometimes purposely folded it all quite sloppily. In Geometrics 14, I was experimenting with bias cut itajime strips in an attempt to make my pieces less linear. I expected my bias strips to be more curvy, which they were, as you can see on your screen. But I discovered that after multiple rinsing, the bias cut strips also came out with lush fringed edges, and I exploited that in a few pieces. I think this piece was also the first time that I used raw edges. Not sure you can see that on your screen. My Geometrics collection was also an adventure for me in working in a series. Each successive piece prompted the question, what if, compelling me to make another. In the end, I made 26 12-inch pieces and 7 larger ones, 2 of which you can see behind me. I was invited to show the collection at a local art gallery. I called the show Geometrics, Bound and Unbound, because while I spent much of my time binding cloth into various geometric shapes, dyeing it, and then unbinding it to be surprised with what I find, I knew that really my mission with this project was about unbinding myself. Thank you.
Wow. So fascinating to be able to hear the stories behind the artwork. I love looking at the artwork, but until you hear from the artists themselves, it's difficult to know exactly what inspired them and what their journey was. If you would like to know more about the almost 400 pieces in SAQA's Benefit Auction, please go to SAQA.com/auction. We invite you to create your own dream collection of 8 pieces that you think go well together. We'd be delighted to put that up on our website for other people to enjoy. And if you'd like to be part of the auction, please go ahead and register at hand bid. The directions are on SAQA's website. And just enjoy the art that's there and throughout the rest of the website. We are going to now share with you another slideshow of about 100 pieces from the auction. But before we do that, I want to just tell you that next Wednesday, the Textile Talk will be Sewing and Survival, Native American Quilts from 1880 to 2022, presented by the International Quilt Museum. Carolyn Ducey will be interviewing lecturer and historian Teresita Leal as she shares information from her latest book, Sewing and Survival, Native American Quilts. They're going to show you some of the amazing indigenous quilts that are from the museum's collection, as well as talk about this interesting tradition of Native American quilts. So I hope you will join us next week. In the meantime, please enjoy these wonderful quilts from our upcoming auction. Thank you.